Nearly a decade ago, my wife and I embarked on an adventurous hiking trip to southern Massachusetts. Our destination was the picturesque Miles Standish State Forest. After careful consideration, we settled on a charming cabin rental that perfectly fit our budget. Excitement filled our hearts as we eagerly booked the place for a delightful weekend retreat. Upon arrival, we were captivated by the cabin's beauty, its quaint location not far from a heart-shaped pond, and its convenient access to the numerous hiking trails that dotted the surrounding park. Our first day was nothing short of magical. We indulged in a delightful picnic near College Pond, followed by a simple yet satisfying campfire-style dinner back at our cozy cabin. As the sun dipped below the horizon, darkness settled in, casting a new aura over the forest. However, our urban upbringing made the transition from city nights to woodland nights a bit intimidating. Despite the eerie feeling that enveloped us, we knew the forest was dotted with other cabins and campsites, leaving us with a sense of safety that comforted our hearts. The novelty of spending a night surrounded by nature was an adventure in itself, and it didn't disturb our sleep. The second day mirrored the first in its splendor. We set out on another hiking expedition, exploring more of the forest's scenic trails, and enjoyed a delightful alfresco lunch amidst nature's beauty. The day was wrapped up with an exquisite plan: a fancy 3-course dinner and a bottle of wine in the nearby town of Mirbeau, just south of Plymouth. Alas, a bit too much wine took its toll on my wife, and she was soon fast asleep, softly snoring the night away. I, on the other hand, stayed awake for a while, preparing for bed by brushing my teeth and taking a refreshing shower. Just before midnight, I set an alarm for the next morning and settled down to rest. Sometime later, I was roused from my slumber by a gentle vibration on the rustic wooden bedside table. I reached for what I thought was my phone, only to realize that the noise came from elsewhere. A soft scratching sound emanating from the cabin wall near my head. Initially, I tried to shrug it off, attributing it to some nocturnal woodland creature going about its business. After all, my research had indicated that the local fauna primarily comprised snakes, foxes, and coyotes, with bears and mountain lions being extremely rare in the area. However, the scratching sound didn't abate. Instead, it shifted, seemingly higher up on the wall, sounding larger, possibly like the movement of a fox or a coyote. The sudden change was unsettling, though not entirely alarming. Still, I couldn't ignore the feeling that something wasn't quite right. Optimistically, I tried to go back to sleep, hoping the scratching would cease on its own. But it persisted, making slumber impossible. In an attempt to scare off whatever creature was causing the disturbance, I ventured out of bed and approached the source of the noise. I tapped the wall with my fist, hoping the vibrations would send the animal away. To my relief, the scratching momentarily ceased, and my wife remained undisturbed in her slumber. I returned to bed, hoping the encounter was over. However, my hopes were dashed as the scratching resumed with persistence. Realizing that sleep was now an elusive dream, I made a decision to confront the situation head-on. With flashlight in hand, I stepped outside to face whatever intruder was disturbing our peace. My confidence stemmed from the belief that any wildlife would scurry away at the sight of the light or the sound of my approaching footsteps. But to my horror, the scurrying footsteps that I heard did not sound like an animal. They sounded distinctly like those of a person. This unsettling revelation sent a shiver down my spine and left me paralyzed with fear. Fearing the worst, I rushed back into the cabin and grabbed the heaviest object I could find, a sturdy skillet for self-defense. My heart raced, and I felt vulnerable and terrified. As I considered confronting the unknown intruder, I realized that I had no intimidating words to shout, no witty bravado to offer. Instead, I found myself frantically spinning around with my flashlight, desperately scanning every shadowy corner to ensure no one was lurking, preparing to pounce on me. Thankfully, the sound of footsteps eventually faded into the distance, seemingly vanishing into the darkness. Though I had no definitive proof, I knew with absolute certainty that it was not an animal, but a person who had been scratching something onto the cabin wall. The chilling realization made it difficult for me to collect my thoughts, let alone find any sense of comfort in the darkness. Summoning all my courage, I returned to the cabin, locking the front door behind me, and woke up my wife. Although still partially under the influence of the wine, her sleepiness dissipated rapidly upon hearing my account. I instructed her to keep her cell phone nearby in case we needed to call for help. As we huddled together in the cabin, listening intently for any sign of intrusion, we wrestled with various possibilities. Was it just a foolish prank by some mischievous kids? Were they merely trying to scare us for a laugh? Or was there something more sinister at play? The uncertainty and fear gnawed at us. After a few tense minutes of silence, we decided it was best to seek safety elsewhere. With our belongings hastily packed, we resolved to leave the cabin behind, hoping to find solace and security elsewhere. Before departing, my wife contacted the local authorities to report the unnerving incident, and we left a message for the cabin owner explaining our abrupt departure. As we drove away from the forest, our minds were filled with questions and concern. Who could have been behind this unsettling event? What was their motive, and what did they intend to achieve with the strange scratching on our cabin wall? Though we entertained the idea that it might have been nothing more than a bizarre prank, our instincts urged us not to downplay the gravity of the situation. The cabin owner responded kindly, refunding our final night's stay and returning our security deposit in full, proving that they were not involved in any elaborate conspiracy. However, the mystery remained unsolved. We couldn't shake the feeling that someone had intentionally targeted us, perhaps knowing the cabin was occupied, and that notion sent chills down our spines. Despite not having concrete answers, we had no regrets about cutting our vacation short. As my wife wisely put it, we had seen enough horror movies to know that when things start to feel eerie, it's best not to stick around. Our safety and peace of mind were paramount, and we were grateful that we hadn't encountered any more troubling situations. To this day, the memory of that night lingers in our minds. We still don't know precisely what occurred, but we've come to terms with the fact that some mysteries are better left unsolved. We often wonder if it was a harmless prank gone awry, or something far more sinister, but we're content with our decision to I am a 31-year-old female, originally from Oregon, and the incident I'm about to share happened when I was 28, during the height of the #MeToo movement. It was a time of heightened awareness and conversations about gender dynamics, consent, and safety for women everywhere. Little did I know that I would soon have a personal encounter that would leave a lasting impact on my perspective. One evening, I remember sitting down with a friend and discussing the not all men aspect of the movement. We both agreed that it was essential not to label all men as predators, as that would be both unfair and inaccurate. However, we did have a nuanced difference in our views on personal safety. My friend believed that since anyone, regardless of how they presented themselves, could potentially be a predator, it made sense to exercise a degree of caution around every man outside of immediate family. This approach seemed excessively pessimistic to me, and I preferred to evaluate situations on a case-by-case basis. We debated back and forth over a few drinks, never reaching a definite conclusion, but it was a thought-provoking conversation nonetheless. Little did I know that this discussion would soon become much more than just a philosophical exchange of ideas. A few months later, I found myself itching to get outdoors again after 6 months of being locked inside due to various circumstances. Additionally, I was working on a photography project as part of my lockdown side hustle, and capturing the beauty of the mountains and their surroundings was an integral part of it. So I decided to head to government camp in my native Oregon, parked my car in the old Golden Poles parking lot, and began my hike up my favorite trail, leading towards the foothills of Mount Hood. My reasons for embarking on this trek were twofold. Firstly, I wanted to reconnect with nature after being cooped up for so long, and secondly, I needed to capture the perfect shots for my photography project. I ventured up the trail, reaching a point where the ski runs began, and started taking pictures of the breathtaking scenery. Satisfied with my shots, I began making my way back down towards town, snapping more photos along the way. About halfway down the trail, I encountered a fork, and as I glanced to my left, I saw someone standing there, and they immediately caught my attention. The reason being that this individual wasn't wearing any hiking gear, which was unusual considering the location. Almost everyone I had encountered on this trail wore either ski or hiking attire, but this person seemed lost, with long hair, sneakers, baggy shorts, and a t-shirt. They appeared to be your average white skater guy, probably aged between 20 and 24. Initially, it wasn't entirely out of the ordinary, but something about the situation felt off. We made eye contact for a brief moment, and I offered a polite smile before continuing on my way. As I walked away, I heard the guy call out to me, asking if the trail led up the mountain. I replied that it didn't, but it would lead him to another trail that did. I wished him luck and carried on with my hike, not giving it much thought. But then, just a few steps away, I heard him call out again, and this time, he said something that struck me as absurd. He claimed that my backpack was his. I couldn't help but let out a silent laugh, thinking it must be some kind of joke or misunderstanding. I turned back to him and politely explained that he must be mistaken, as the backpack had my name on it, Maddie. Surprisingly, he leaned in and squinted at the writing, as if it were too tiny to read, even though it was in big block capital letters. He then asked me, sounding genuinely hurt, why I would do that. It was at that moment that I felt a slight unease creeping in, and I remembered the cautionary conversation with my friend about exercising vigilance around strangers. Suddenly, I felt the need to be more aware of my surroundings and potential threats. I reminded myself that it's always better to be safe than sorry. I had learned about being cautious, and that rule applied to mountain trails as well. I always kept a miniature pepper spray on my car keys for such situations, so I decided to take it out and have it ready just in case. The guy continued to walk towards me slowly and casually, reiterating that the backpack was his and that he had been looking for it all afternoon. Giving him the benefit of the doubt, I slipped my backpack off my shoulders, opened it, and showed him its contents, emphasizing that it was indeed mine. To my surprise, he persisted in his claim, his demeanor turning more stubborn. At this point, my instincts told me that something was off about this guy, and I didn't want to stick around to find out what his intentions were. I decided to leave, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was now following me. My heart started to race as I realized the situation was becoming more concerning. As we continued walking, with me in the lead and him about 15 feet behind, I mustered the courage to confront him about his actions. I asked him outright if he was following me, and to my dismay, he admitted that he was, still insisting that the backpack was his. I knew I had to be firm and assertive, so I warned him that if he didn't stop following me, I would use the pepper spray and call the police. In response, he became defensive and retorted with statements like, "Do it. Call the cops. That's my bag you're carrying with my stuff in it." I couldn't believe the audacity of this guy, and his persistence only fueled my sense of unease. I turned back and continued walking, my hand gripping the pepper spray tightly, ready to use it if necessary. I realized that if I wanted to stay safe, I might have to walk backward the entire way down to government camp, constantly keeping an eye on him. The best I could do was maintain a safe distance and be prepared for anything. The guy continued to trail me, shouting and yelling, becoming more aggressive and obnoxious with each passing moment. It was a stark contrast to the polite and well-mannered demeanor he had initially displayed. At one point, he even criticized me, saying I needed therapy and that I had issues in my head that I needed to resolve. His words were both hurtful and disturbing, and I knew I needed to keep my emotions in check to avoid giving him the satisfaction he seemed to be seeking. I felt a mix of fear, anger, and frustration as we continued down the trail. His words were meant to provoke a response, but I chose not to engage. I understood that he either wanted to close the distance between us or simply desired the attention he wasn't getting from me. The distance between the point where I first encountered him and the trail's end was only about a mile, but it felt like an eternity. With every step, I longed to see other people or houses in the distance, as that would at least give me some sense of safety. Finally, I saw some individuals walking around near the houses at the end of East Blossom Trail, and it brought immense relief. Seeing other people nearby meant that even if the guy continued to follow me, he wouldn't dare try anything with witnesses around. It was comforting to know that others might intervene if the situation escalated further. But just as I began to feel some relief, the guy had one last trick up his sleeve. As I called out for help to the people approaching us, he started screaming over me, trying to get their attention first. He claimed that his sister was in distress and needed help, making up a desperate story to manipulate the situation. The panic in his voice was palpable, and I worried that these people might be swayed by his fabricated tale. However, the moment he rushed towards me with the intention to close the distance, I acted instinctively and quickly released a burst of pepper spray in his direction. I was grateful that most of it hit him despite his attempts to shield his face. The painful effects of the spray were enough to slow him down and give me a chance to regain my footing. As I stood up, shaken but resolute, I saw the two hikers I had called out to earlier come running to my aid. They had witnessed the altercation and rushed to help me. I explained everything to them, the harassment I had endured throughout the hike, and they kindly agreed to stay with the guy until help arrived. With the hikers by my side, I began walking towards the trail's end once again, this time with more confidence and assurance. I pulled out my phone and called the police, recounting the entire incident to the dispatcher. I couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the hikers who had come to my rescue at just the right moment. As we walked off, I couldn't help but look back at the scene unfolding behind us. The two hikers were now wrestling with the guy, keeping him pinned to the ground until help arrived. It was a surreal sight, but it filled me with relief, knowing that the potential danger was now being handled by the authorities. Even after the incident, I couldn't shake off the unnerving feeling that lingered within me. It was deeply disturbing to think about how devious and manipulative this guy had been, trying to overpower me mentally rather than physically. It left me wondering if he was genuinely psychotic or simply struggling with mental illness. Either way, I was grateful that I had escaped unharmed and that the hikers had come to my aid when I needed it the most. Looking back, I realized just how fortunate I was that day. The situation could have taken a much darker turn, and I shuddered at the thought of what might have happened if I hadn't been prepared or if the hikers hadn't shown up in time. It was a stark reminder that even in familiar settings, one should never let their guard down completely and always be vigilant about personal safety. The incident left an indelible mark on my psyche, reaffirming the importance of staying alert and taking precautionary measures when navigating through life's unpredictable moments. It also deepened my appreciation for the kindness of strangers and the importance of community watchfulness, as the hikers had proved to be my guardian angels on that fateful day. Christina Calica was born on December 19, 1986, in Canada, marking the beginning of a life that would be shrouded in mystery and unanswered questions. She grew up in the loving care of her parents, Elizabeth and Mario Calica, who were Filipino migrants. As the only daughter in the family, Christina experienced a devoutly Catholic upbringing, instilling in her a strong sense of faith and discipline. Alongside her religious beliefs, she was known for her hard-working nature and natural leadership abilities, qualities that set her apart from others. Having set her sights on a bright future, Christina dreamt of attending Teachers College at Toronto's prestigious York University. At 5 feet 2 inches tall and weighing 125 pounds, she not only excelled academically, but also kept her body in shape through her passion for playing volleyball. On occasion, she would challenge herself with jogging to maintain her fitness levels. The year was 2007, and just before the civic holiday in August, Christina made plans to attend a Christian youth conference in the bustling city of Montreal. However, fate had other plans for her. At the last minute, she decided to embark on a different adventure, opting for a hiking trip to Ontario's picturesque Rainbow Falls Provincial Park. Accompanying her on this journey were her cousin, Faith Costello, and two friends, Eddie Miga and Joe Benedict. The expansive Rainbow Falls Provincial Park covered a vast area of approximately 2 square miles, located on Highway 17, nestled between the towns of Schreiber and Rossport. Within its boundaries were two main camping areas: the primary White Sand Lake site, situated just a few hundred meters from the park's entrance, and the smaller Rossport site, located 3 kilometers to the west, not far from the Trans-Canada Highway. The park boasted a network of hiking trails, most of which were relatively easy, spanning between 3 and 5 kilometers in length. However, the formidable Cask Isles Trail stood out as an exception, stretching a whopping 32 miles, traversing the park from Rossport all the way to Terrace Bay. As the clock struck noon on Sunday, August 5, 2007, Christina and her adventurous companions arrived at Rainbow Falls Provincial Park, brimming with excitement for what lay ahead. The journey from Toronto had taken them approximately 14 hours, leaving them understandably exhausted. Despite their weariness, they quickly set up camp on Lot 88 of the White Sand Lake campsite, exchanging friendly greetings with their temporary neighbors. The holiday weekend brought a multitude of visitors to the park, leaving only a handful of lots unoccupied. In need of rest, the group decided to take a short nap, intending for it to be just half an hour. However, exhaustion took its toll, and their brief nap extended into a 4-hour snooze. When they awoke around 10:30 at night, they ignited a small campfire and enjoyed a meal together, complemented by a modest amount of alcohol. The clock ticked away, and as the early hours of the morning approached, around 3:30 a.m., Christina and Eddie decided to head back to bed, anticipating the activities planned for the next day. The plan was for Christina and Eddie to go running together at the crack of dawn, seizing the opportunity to explore the park's captivating trails. True to their plan, the two friends embarked on a 30-minute run together, basking in the tranquility of nature and the thrill of exploration. However, as the minutes passed, Christina began to feel the weight of fatigue settling upon her. Upon reaching an intersection near the park's entrance, they decided to part ways temporarily. Eddie would continue along the longer of the two trails, leading towards Highway 17, while Christina opted to visit the nearby eponymous Rainbow Falls waterfall before eventually returning to camp. As Eddie made his way along the trail, he soon found himself becoming tired and needing to catch his breath. It was then that he paused briefly, taking a moment to carve the first initials of all 4 members of their group onto a rock, a sentimental reminder of their shared journey. With that done, he retraced his steps, heading back towards the campsite. Meanwhile, the morning light began to grace the park, signaling the dawn of a new day. Joe Benedict and Faith Costello emerged from their tents around 9:30 a.m., their eyes filled with anticipation for the day's activities. They proceeded to make breakfast and take showers, confident that Christina would return any moment to join them. However, as the hours passed, concern began to seep into their hearts. At 11 a.m., Joe and Eddie decided to search for Christina, starting with the trail that led to the waterfall, a place they knew she had wanted to visit. The two men's search efforts extended to other trails in the area, covering Lake Superior Trail and Rainbow Falls Trail, among others, but Christina was nowhere to be found. Growing increasingly worried, the group tried to remain calm, holding on to the hope that Christina would emerge any moment, her warm smile breaking through the uncertainties that had encased them. By mid-afternoon, with no sign of their dear friend, they approached a park ranger to report her missing. Immediately, the Ontario Police's Regional Emergency Response Team took charge of the search operation, establishing a command post near White Sand Island. A formidable force of nearly 100 personnel, including police officers, firefighters, divers, and highly trained canines, scoured every nook and cranny of the park, utilizing GPS equipment, underwater radar, infrared cameras, and advanced search techniques. The rugged terrain and challenging weather conditions tested the resolve of the search teams. In the course of their work, some personnel sustained severe injuries, with one man requiring emergency surgery for horrific facial lacerations resulting from a rappelling accident. Another search member endured a sprained ankle and twisted knee after a treacherous fall down a steep slope. An unusual aspect of the search effort involved tracker dogs, expertly trained to navigate the wilderness. These skilled canines followed Christina's scent trail, tracing her steps where she had been running with Eddie Mega. But puzzlingly, the trail ended near Rainbow Falls. There was no trace of her beyond that point, leaving investigators puzzled and her friends and family desperate for answers. With each passing day, the search intensified, drawing on advanced search techniques and behavioral profiles of lost hikers to narrow down the potential areas for Christina's whereabouts. However, despite their collective efforts, Christina remained elusive, and her fate remained uncertain. Christina's family and her close-knit community refused to give up hope. Setting up a makeshift camp on lots rented by friends and well-wishers, they clung to the belief that Christina would be found. A Catholic priest and fellow Filipino-Canadian, Raul Escar, joined them, conducting special masses to comfort and strengthen their spirits, while also raising awareness of Christina's case. With the case garnering public attention, a team of around 200 volunteers joined the search, including local politicians, adding their weight to the quest for answers. However, as time wore on and the search yielded no results, frustration and hopelessness began to creep in. In a tragic twist of fate, the Ontario Provincial Police used the term non-responsive person to describe Christina by late August, indicating that she would not be able to respond if called out to by searchers. Despite the dedication and efforts of the search teams, the decision was made to reduce the search force to a skeleton crew of 20 officers, forced to face the grim reality that Christina might no longer be within the park's boundaries. 2 days later, on a somber note, the search was officially called off, and investigative theories began to shift towards the possibility of abduction. However, this theory was met with criticism from Christina's family, who believed there was no concrete evidence to support such a scenario. Yet, despite the lack of answers, Christina's family never stopped searching and hoping for her safe return. Various theories emerged, each one carrying the weight of uncertainty and despair. Some speculated about bear attacks, while others believed that Christina might have accidentally fallen victim to the unforgiving wilderness due to her limited experience in hiking. Nevertheless, none of these theories could be conclusively proven. Dennis LeVay, a convicted child predator, was also named as a potential suspect, given his history of abusing teenage girls. His predatory tendencies and proximity to the park during the time of Christina's disappearance sparked speculation. However, the Ontario Provincial Police dismissed this theory, failing to find any solid evidence linking LeVay to the case. The possibility that Christina intentionally disappeared, seeking to sever ties with her community and family, was also raised. In a community with strict religious values, such an act might not be unheard of for individuals seeking an escape from judgment and shame. However, those who knew Christina best vehemently disagreed with this theory, as she had a close and loving relationship with her parents and continued to practice her Christian faith unwaveringly. As the months turned into years and still no sign of Christina surfaced, the search and rescue efforts faced numerous challenges. Dense sections of the forest and treacherous terrain made locating an immobilized person challenging. Search teams faced obstacles from the dense vegetation that would keep a body upright, obscuring it from aerial search teams. Despite the extensive coverage from aerial searches, no conclusive evidence of Christina's whereabouts was uncovered. In March 2009, a glimmer of hope appeared when a volunteer with a Minnesota-based search and rescue nonprofit reported indications of human remains in the Hewitson River during a privately funded search. 6 cadaver dogs alerted to the presence of human remains, but the depth and speed of the water thwarted further investigation. Despite the compelling leads, the mystery surrounding Christina's disappearance persisted, leaving many to wonder if she had indeed met with foul play, or if she still walked among us, living a life hidden from her past. The search for Christina Calica continues to this day, with her family and community refusing to give up hope. While the circumstances of her disappearance remain shrouded in uncertainty, the memory of Christina lives on, forever etched in the hearts of those who loved her, awaiting the day when answers will finally come to light and justice will be served. Until that day, the disappearance of Christina Calica stands as a haunting enigma, a tale of a life lost and the unyielding quest for truth.